I noticed his hand first, the way it shook when I spoke my father's name aloud. 4 stars gleamed on his shoulder boards. Admiral Marcus Brennan, one of the most formidable men in the United States Navy, someone who'd commanded fleets and ordered strikes that changed the course of history. Yet here he stood in this narrow hallway, frozen like I'd just fired a round past his head. His eyes glistened under the fluorescent lights, his jaw locked tight, and his fingers, those steady, decorated fingers that had signed deployment orders and promotion papers, they curled around a ring on his left hand as though he suddenly regretted ever putting it on. "Please," he whispered, and his voice cracked in a way that flag officers never allow in public spaces. "Lieutenant Commander, not here, not in front of them." He glanced toward his aides, who were still moving down the corridor, oblivious. "We need to talk, right now." That's when I felt it. Not hope, not quite fear, but something sharper. Recognition. Because the moment his fingers touched that ring, the same ring my father wore every single day until the night he died, I understood that nothing about my life, my grief, or my father's death was what I'd been told. People think Navy SEALs walk through the world unshakable, bulletproof. But the truth? Silence weighs heavier on us than fear, especially the kind of silence that follows loss. I'd been living inside that silence for nearly 2 years, ever since the night I got the call. Ever since they told me my father's car had left the highway on a straight stretch of road he'd driven 1,000 times before. Ever since they handed me a folded flag and closed the case before I could even ask a question. I remember standing in my quarters afterward, staring at my own reflection in the small mirror above my sink, telling myself I was still whole, still a SEAL, still an officer. But grief doesn't care about your rank or your training. It seeps in through the cracks, through the empty chair at Thanksgiving, through the silence where advice used to be, through the weight of a legacy you're not sure you can carry. And it had left me alone. A junior officer by title, but a 35-year-old woman carrying the ghosts of a lifetime. The morning Admiral Brennan arrived on base, the air itself felt different, stiffer. The kind of tension you only see when top brass is inbound. Marines at the gate stood straighter. Security swept every corridor twice. Even the ventilation system seemed louder, like the building itself was holding its breath. I was buried in post-deployment paperwork when the whisper started rippling through the admin wing. "He's here. Just landed. They're bringing him through the south entrance." A 4-star doesn't visit a mid-sized stateside installation without a reason, and that reason is never routine. I wasn't on his schedule, wasn't briefed, wasn't even supposed to be in the same hallway. But fate, or something far darker, placed me there at the exact moment he walked past. The first thing I noticed wasn't his uniform, or the chest full of ribbons, or the aura of authority that surrounded him like armor. It was his left hand. More specifically, the ring on it. Thick, heavy, navy gold, with a custom-carved trident, polished edges, and a deep blue center stone. My father's ring. Not like my father's ring. My father's exact ring. The one he'd designed with a jeweler during his final years in service. The one he never took off. The one they told me had never been recovered from the wreck. Seeing it again? On a stranger's hand? Nearly knocked the air from my lungs. I stared, unable to breathe. My heart slamming so hard against my ribs, I thought everyone in the hallway could hear it. My father's ring wasn't mass-produced. It wasn't something you could order online or find at the Navy Exchange. Anyone wearing it had to be connected to him, deeply. I tried to swallow the shock rising in my throat. But the Admiral looked up right then. Our eyes met. Maybe he saw the confusion on my face. Maybe he recognized something of my father in me. The same sharp gaze, the same stubborn set of the jaw. Because for just a split second, his expression changed. Not the calm, unreadable mask flag officers wear in public, but something raw, something human. I didn't care about protocol at that moment. I didn't care that I was a lieutenant commander and he was a 4-star. Didn't care that his aides were still moving ahead, expecting him to follow. I needed to know. So when the briefing broke and he stepped into the hallway, I walked straight toward him. "Admiral," I said, voice steady even though my hands were ice cold. "May I ask about your ring?" He stopped mid-stride. His aides kept walking, but he didn't follow. He turned slowly, studying my face like he was trying to place a memory just out of reach. "This?" he asked quietly, lifting his hand. "Yes, sir," I said. "That ring is familiar." He looked at me longer than was comfortable. Then something shifted in him. His shoulders tightened, his jaw clenched, his pupils narrowed like a man bracing for impact. "Who was your father?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The hallway seemed to stretch into infinity. The fluorescent lights hummed louder. My throat tightened, but I forced the words out. "Master Chief Aaron Hale." For 2 seconds, nothing happened. Then his face cracked. Actually cracked into a mixture of grief, shock, and something dangerously close to guilt. He stepped back, his hand gripping the ring like it had suddenly turned scorching hot. "No," he whispered, "not you. Dear God, you're his daughter." The world tilted. He removed his cover with shaking hands, something 4-star admirals do not do in hallways. "Lieutenant Commander," he said, and his voice broke like a dam giving way. "We can't talk here. We need privacy. Now." And that's when I realized the truth. He wasn't just surprised to see Master Chief Aaron Hale's daughter standing in front of him. He was terrified. Of what? Of me? Of the past? Of the truth? I didn't know. Not yet. But the ring, the look in his eyes, the way his voice cracked when he said my father's name, I knew 3 things with absolute certainty. My father's death wasn't an accident. This man knew something he'd buried for 2 years, and nothing in my life was ever going to be the same again. What secret had the Admiral been carrying? And why did seeing me shake him to his core? When a 4-star Admiral asks you to follow him in private, you don't hesitate. At least, not outwardly. But inside, my pulse hammered so hard I could feel it in my throat, in my fingertips, in the base of my skull. We walked in silence down a quiet administrative corridor, past framed photographs of sailors and Marines who'd served entire careers without ever brushing up against the kind of secrets I sensed were about to surface. The Admiral opened a small conference room at the end of the hall. He shut the door behind us with deliberate care, then drew the blinds. He didn't sit right away. Instead, he stood with his hand resting on the back of a chair, staring at me the way someone stares at an old photograph they're not ready to pick up. "You look like him," he said finally, his voice low and rough. "Not exactly, but the eyes, the posture, the way you walked toward me just now. I thought I was seeing a ghost." I didn't know how to respond. My father had been gone for nearly 2 years, and people rarely mentioned him anymore, mostly because I didn't let them. The topic hurt too much. But hearing it from someone of this man's stature, someone who clearly knew my father deeply, sent a strange mix of warmth and ache through my chest. "Admiral," I said carefully, "that ring, my father had one just like it, identical, custom made.
And when he died, they told me it wasn't found in the wreck. He lowered himself slowly into the chair, like the weight of memory was heavier than his uniform. "Sit, Lieutenant Commander," he murmured. I sat across from him, hands clasped so tight my knuckles turned white. He rubbed his brow, exhaled slowly, then met my eyes. "Your father didn't just have a ring like this. This is his ring." My breath caught. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the table. "Sir, what do you mean, his?" He removed the ring from his finger, slowly, reverently, and placed it gently on the table between us. It looked even more familiar up close. The engraving, the deep blue stone, the slight scratch on the inner band from where my father had once caught it on a locker handle. It belongs to Master Chief Aaron Hale. It always has. I swallowed hard. The memory of my father's hand, warm, calloused, strong, flashing across my mind. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Finally, I managed, How did you get it?" The Admiral leaned back, staring at the ring like it was something radioactive. "Your father and I served together long before you were born. We went through hell in a place most Americans will never know about. Not combat in the traditional sense, but something covert, something messy, political, and dangerous."
He paused, his eyes losing focus, as if he were reliving the moment. "He saved my life." I stayed silent, letting him continue. "When we made it out," he went on, "we designed 2 matching rings, brotherhood rings, we called them. Mine stayed pristine. Your father's," his voice caught, "he wore every day until the accident." My throat tightened. Hearing another man speak about my father like this, it was almost too much. "But that doesn't explain," I said softly, "why it wasn't recovered in the crash or how it ended up with you." His jaw clenched. "Because I pulled it off his hand myself." I froze. The air felt thin. The clock on the wall ticked too loudly. "You were there," I whispered. He nodded. "Not when it happened, but shortly after. I was notified far earlier than you were." His voice dropped. "Everything in me told me something was wrong, so I rushed to the scene before the official teams arrived. They hadn't cordoned it off yet. The car was mangled, and your father," he swallowed hard, "he didn't deserve the way he died." My chest tightened. Part of me wanted to scream. Another part wanted to grab his collar and demand the whole truth at once. But I held myself still. "Sir," I managed, "why take the ring?" He rubbed his temples, exhaling shakily. "Because I intended to give it to you," he said. "But when I saw the condition of the investigation, the sloppiness, the quick dismissal, the push to label it an accident, I realized something wasn't right." He looked up, guilt etched into every line of his face. "And I feared if the ring was found, it might disappear into evidence and never make its way back to you. So I took it. It was wrong, but I thought I was protecting his legacy." I pressed my hand against my sternum, steadying my breath. It felt like someone had ripped open a wound I'd spent 2 years pretending didn't exist. "Sir," I said quietly, "that accident was investigated. NCIS closed the case." He looked up sharply. "Closed it because someone wanted it closed." My heartbeat kicked into another gear. Someone wanted it closed. Someone didn't want questions asked. Someone didn't want the truth.
But why? I whispered. He hesitated, a long, painful hesitation that told me he was fighting something inside himself. Guilt, fear, loyalty? I couldn't tell. You deserve the truth, he said finally, but it won't be easy to hear. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely more than a whisper. Your father, he was involved in something just before he died, something that put him in conflict with people who had power, real power. My pulse roared in my ears. He didn't tell you because he wanted to protect your career. I felt my breath catch. Protect my... What do I have to do with any of this? The Admiral looked straight into my eyes, and the sorrow there made my skin prickle. More than you know. The room felt too small, too bright, too quiet. What are you saying? I demanded. He lifted the ring again, holding it between us like a symbol of everything he'd kept buried. Lieutenant Commander, your father didn't die because of an accident. A chill swept through me, from the base of my spine to the top of my scalp. He died because he refused to let someone ruin your future. My father died protecting me. The Admiral slid the ring toward me with trembling fingers. There's more, a lot more, and I'm going to tell you, but you need to prepare yourself. His voice cracked. Your father was a man of honor, and he paid the price for it. I stared at the ring, my father's ring, and for the first time since his death, I felt something shift inside me, a mixture of rage, grief, and purpose. Tell me everything, I said. The Admiral closed his eyes, bracing himself for the confession that would change the course of my life. What had my father discovered, and who was powerful enough to kill him for it? He didn't start talking right away. For a long moment, the Admiral just sat there, elbows on the table, hands folded over his mouth like he was trying to hold the words in. I'd seen battle-hardened operators freeze before jumping out of a plane or breaching a door. This was the same look, only now it was about memory, not bullets. You know your father's record, he said finally. You've read the citations, Silver Star, Bronze Star, commendations. He gave a short, humorless breath. But you don't know the story behind them. Not all of it. My father didn't talk about himself, I said. That sounds like him, the Admiral muttered. He always thought bragging was a waste of air. He paused, rubbing the bridge of his nose. We were young then, different Navy. We ended up on a mission together, the kind they don't put in history books. Your father wasn't even supposed to be there. He volunteered. Another pause. And the op went sideways. His voice dropped. I was the one who froze up, not him. I stared at him. A 4-star admiral admitting that to a junior officer was something I never expected to hear. There was a hostage situation in a foreign port. Narrow streets, bad intel, bad weather. I made a bad call, walked us into a kill box. His fingers tapped the table absently. Your father dragged me out of it. I'd taken shrapnel, couldn't move my leg. He got me to cover, patched me up, and then went back in to finish the job. The Admiral's gaze grew distant. He took down 3 men, secured the hostages, and got everyone home. I got the public credit. He got the scar tissue. He looked at me again, and there was something raw in his expression. After that, we weren't just colleagues. We were family. We had those rings made afterward, he said, tapping the band between us. We told ourselves if either of us ever forgot who we really were, what mattered, that ring would remind us. He looked at me with something close to anguish. Your father never forgot, even when it cost him. I swallowed. Cost him what, sir? His gaze hardened. His life. The room grew very still. I'm not going to sugarcoat this, the Admiral said. 2 years ago, your father started poking around a series of contracts tied to this base and a few others. Maintenance, gear, training programs. He leaned forward. On paper, everything looked fine. Too fine. Numbers a little too round, results a little too perfect. He had an eye for that. Yes, he did, I said quietly. My father could sense dishonesty in a heartbeat. He started asking questions, quietly at first. He spoke to a few supply chiefs, a few warrant officers. Some brushed him off. Others, let's just say they seemed nervous. Nervous about what? I frowned. One of the contractors providing gear to multiple commands had friends in high places. Friends more interested in keeping the money flowing than in checking if the product was worth a dime. I frowned. Gear. You mean weapons?
Some weapons, some protective equipment, some training aids, software, vehicle parts. He said the next words like they tasted bad. When there's a lot of money on the table, people get creative with what they call savings. Your father called a pattern. Equipment logged as new that looked like refurbished junk. Parts certified as tested that failed in real-world use. Small things at first, easy to ignore. He met my eyes, but he wouldn't ignore them. He realized if we deployed with some of that gear, people could die. That sounds like him, I whispered. The Admiral gave a faint, sad smile. He reacted exactly how I expected. He started writing things down. Dates, serial numbers, names. He reached out to an inspector he trusted, an honest man. His expression darkened. And that's when the trouble started. A cold feeling spread through my chest. What kind of trouble? The contractor got wind of it, maybe through a leak, maybe through someone who owed them a favor. Suddenly, your father got called in for informal chats. People suggested he was overworked, that maybe he should consider retirement. He paused. That maybe his daughter's career would be smoother if he didn't stir up waves. My jaw clenched. They threatened my career. In a roundabout way, the Admiral said. I wasn't in the room, but I saw the notes he made. They wanted him to back off, and they used you as leverage. It felt like someone shoved a knife between my ribs. He came to see me, the Admiral said softly. Brought a folder. Told me what he suspected. Told me they'd hinted that his ambitious daughter had a bright future, as long as he stopped digging. He shook his head, voice bitter. I told him I'd look into it, that I'd handle it. He laughed once, sharp, humorless. But the higher you go in this job, the more noise there is. Meetings, travel, politics. I took the folder, and somewhere between one airport and another, I delayed. Convinced myself it couldn't be that bad. Anger rose in my chest. So you did nothing. I did not do enough, he admitted, and the pain in his voice was real.
Your father was one of the most honorable men I ever served with. But honor doesn't mesh well with certain people, especially people who profit from silence. A bitter taste filled my mouth. So who were they? Contractors? Civilians? Someone in uniform? His eyes flicked to the door like he was measuring every word. I don't know the full list, but I know the contractor was the Epicenter, a company that supplies everything, from basic gear to specialized equipment. Unofficially, they're known for cutting corners. Officially, they're untouchable. I frowned. Untouchable? No contractor is untouchable. Most aren't. But this one has political insulation. Friends in D.C., donors with deep pockets, admirals who owe them favors. That makes them very difficult to investigate.
I leaned forward. And you think they're behind my father's death? I think they had motive, he said. I think they had opportunity. And I think your father rattled them enough to make him a problem. A burn of anger rose in my throat. Then why wasn't there an investigation? Why didn't you... I stopped myself, but the words still hung between us. Why didn't you do more? His gaze dropped to his hands. He clenched them, unclenched them, like someone trying to warm, numb fingers. When I arrived at the crash site, the local sheriff's department was already there. They weren't thrilled to see a flag officer, and they made it clear they had no intention of questioning their assessment. That's unusual, I muttered. It was more than unusual, he said. It was rehearsed. I felt a chill crawl beneath my uniform. Rehearsed how? They kept repeating, single vehicle accident, no signs of foul play. Before anyone even checked the car, before anyone examined the undercarriage, before anyone questioned why a man who never drank, never sped, and never drove without a seatbelt just lost control on a dry, empty road. My jaw tightened. They were planting the narrative. He nodded grimly. Exactly. And NCIS, the case was referred to them, but the paperwork was a mess. Missing attachments, incomplete photos. I reached out quietly, but by then the report was already filed. He paused. Everything about that investigation looked rushed, like someone wanted it to disappear before a real investigator could lay eyes on it. My chest felt tight, hot. And you still waited 2 years to tell me? I was wrong, he said immediately. He didn't defend himself, didn't hide behind rank. I thought maybe I was seeing ghosts. Maybe I was projecting guilt from that old mission onto something that was simply a tragedy. His voice cracked slightly. But the ring, the moment you saw it, the way you reacted, I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. I stared at the ring, my father's ring, the one thing that should have been returned to me, the one thing that shouldn't have been missing from the wreck. Suddenly, everything snapped into sharper focus. Someone removed the ring. Someone wanted it gone. And someone wanted the truth buried. For a moment, my grief, quiet, cold, familiar, morphed into something new, real, searing anger. The kind that made the air feel sharp in my lungs. The kind that made my hands shake with purpose rather than pain. So what now? I asked. We just sit on this? The Admiral's eyes hardened with something like resolve. No, we're not sitting on anything. But we have to be smart. This isn't a fight you win by throwing punches.
This is a fight you win by pulling the right threads. I'm listening, I said. He gestured toward a binder he'd brought with him, one I hadn't even noticed until now. Thick, heavy, worn from use. Your father kept copies, he said. Everything he gathered. He was meticulous, detailed, precise. He expected resistance. He knew people might try to twist his words or bury his findings, so he backed them up. A warmth of pride and sorrow filled my chest. That was who he was. He never walked into a battle unprepared. The Admiral opened the binder. Inside were pages of notes in my father's handwriting. Serial numbers, purchase orders, photographs of damaged gear, names, dates, conversations recorded in shorthand. My breath caught. His handwriting, his meticulous, blocky letters. It felt like he was in the room with us. He left this with me 2 years ago. He told me if anything happened to him, I needed to find you. I blinked hard, fighting back tears. He planned for this. He knew he was in danger. He suspected. Your father believed in the system. He believed if he presented the problem clearly, someone would listen. And no one did, I said. The Admiral closed the binder slowly. I didn't. Not soon enough. Silence settled again, thick, suffocating, full of unspoken truth. He said, "You want the truth. You want justice. I can help you, but this won't be simple, and it won't be clean." I grew up with a master chief, I said quietly. Nothing about life is simple or clean. He gave the smallest nod. Then we start with this. He slid the binder toward me. Your father's notes, his timeline, his evidence. You need to study it, understand it, and then we go to the Inspector General. I felt something shift inside me then, a steady, grounding force. The grief that had weighed on me for years was still there, yes, but now it pulsed with direction, with purpose. For the first time since his death, I had something resembling solid ground beneath my feet. I touched the binder. My voice was steady. If he died protecting the truth, then I'll finish what he started. The Admiral's jaw tightened with solemn approval. Then brace yourself, Lieutenant Commander, because once we start this, there's no turning back.